All right, I think I got it to work this time. My name is Elizabeth Gelvin. This is my literature review for this biodiversity class. So, title is Pollinators in Peril, Habitat Fragmentation and Declining Ecosystem Services. Specifically, of course, about bees and butterflies and other insects that pollinate flowers and other types of plants. So, abstract pollinators such as bees, butterflies, and other insects are critical to ecosystem services and global food production, yet their populations are rapidly declining. Habitat fragmentation poses a critical threat to pollinator populations and the ecosystem services they provide. And this literature review synthesizes findings from scholarly peer-reviewed studies to examine how fragmentation influences pollinator diversity, abundance, and pollination function. Using a structured search strategy, several key ecological and agricultural studies from an online database were reviewed, and the results show that fragmentation diminishes pollinator richness, alters community composition, and compromises crop yields. These trends have broader implications as well, including threats to biodiversity, food security, and ecosystem resilience. And these findings also highlight the need for integrative conservation strategies that enhance habitat connectivity and resilience. Understanding these dynamics is vital for developing effective science-based conservation and land use planning. So, I am just going to summarize this introduction. Pollinators, bees, butterflies, other insects play a vital role in natural ecosystems and agriculture. Out of 115 essential global crops, 87 of them benefit from pollination, which is a little over 1/3 of our food supply, so pretty important. However, pollinator populations are in global decline, and habitat fragmentation has been identified over and over again as a key factor in this. And this process of fragmentation leads to isolation of populations, reduces floral and nesting resources, and impedes the movement of these pollinating insects, which compromises their ability to forage and reproduce. Ultimately, as these go on, reduces the quality and reliability of pollination services. And so this review investigates how this process impacts pollinator communities and the delivery of those services, aims to synthesize current findings to evaluate the consequences of these changes. And this topic is significant because it sits right at the intersection of biodiversity loss, food security, and climate resilience. So the method I used for this is pretty straightforward. I used Google Scholar to find the journal articles that I used, and the results were filtered to include only peer-reviewed scholarly articles published within the last 20 years, and of course written in English because I'm not fluent in any other languages. Um, Criteria also included or required empirical or review studies linking habitat fragmentation to pollinator diversity, and opinion pieces and articles without direct relevance to this topic were excluded, and I used a total of 5 articles for this review. The results in these studies that I use consistently demonstrate that habitat fragmentation has multifaceted impacts on diversity and abundance of pollinators, as well as the quality of pollination services. One of the authors conducted a meta-analysis of 54 different studies and found a strong positive correlation between natural habitat cover and bee species richness, as well as negative effects, although it did say that they were somewhat minimal, of human disturbance on bee abundance and species richness. Another researcher showed that crop pollination benefits decreased with increasing distance from natural habitats, highlighting how fragmentation reduces the spatial reach of pollination services. And then a third researcher reported that the loss of semi-natural habitats and agricultural intensification have led to a reduction in pollinator diversity and abundance across Europe, which they illustrate in this figure that I included. Shows two different species in Britain and in the Netherlands, and the distribution of those and the change in the species richness there. The results and findings of this, according to a different researcher, wild insect pollinators were found to increase fruit set regardless of honeybee abundance, indicating the irreplaceable role of wild pollinators, especially in fragmented landscapes where managed bees may not effectively substitute. These findings are reinforced by another one of the researchers I chose to use, who emphasizes the role of diversified farming systems and habitat corridors in sustaining wild pollinator populations. So these studies consistently show that fragmentation diminishes the number of pollinators and also their functional diversity, which are both pretty important for pollinating a wide range of plant species. So the evidence I reviewed supports a clear relationship between habitat fragmentation and declining pollinator diversity and function, converging on the conclusion that habitat fragmentation is a major contributor to pollinator decline and ecosystem service degradation. These findings tend to align with each other. Another researcher emphasized the importance of landscape scale connectivity. And another noted that habitat fragmentation increases species turnover and reduces resilience to environmental stressors. From a socioeconomic perspective, the degradation of these services directly threatens global food production, especially those crops that are dependent on wild pollinators, including but not limited to things like almonds, blueberries, apples, etc. Decline in this service leads to lower crop yields and increased production cost, with downstream effects on food availability and prices. As such, the conservation of pollinators should probably be prioritized not only for the sake of biodiversity, but also for food security and climate resilience. And future research should investigate long-term ecological responses to habitat restoration and explore the effectiveness of green infrastructure in enhancing pollinator connectivity across these landscapes. Some possible limitations of the research that I used include geographic bias towards temperate regions and a focus on a limited number of species. So in response to this, it might be suggested that future research should also seek to expand to tropical regions and incorporate long-term monitoring to understand the cumulative impacts of fragmentation. So, in conclusion, this review highlights that habitat fragmentation is a primary driver of pollinator decline, leading to degraded pollination services and wider ecological consequences. And this evidence also underscores that the severe ecological and societal risks posed by habitat fragmentation to pollinator communities and the critical services they provide, as well as the need to maintain landscape connectivity, floral diversity, and habitat quality to support pollinator populations. And the key studies I reviewed, including those by these three researchers that I listed, consistently demonstrate that fragmented habitats support fewer and less diverse pollinators, which results in compromised ecosystem functioning and crop productivity. So in the future, it would be wise to incorporate the findings of these studies into land use decisions, agricultural practices, and conservation strategies like landscape level interventions, which would aim to maintain and restore habitat connectivity. Ensuring pollinator survival is not just an environmental issue, it is vital for human well-being and food system resilience in a rapidly changing world. And there's my footnotes and notes. These are my works cited.